Thanks for joining us this Monday evening. This is The Pulse. I'm Roop Raj. We have a lot of things to talk about when it comes to people, power, and politics. The people, international students having their visas revoked. It's happening around the country and right here in Michigan. The power in the hands of immigration officials and the State Department. They're in charge of these crackdowns we're seeing, including at the University of Michigan. We'll look at the situation so far. And tariff tensions sparking all over the world. We're sitting down with a former Democratic state rep who says they could hurt us, as well as a car concierge businessman who says eventually tariffs may be a good thing. We'll look at their thoughts in just a few minutes here. But sticking with those tariffs for a moment, U.S. stocks ended lower again today as markets reel from President Donald Trump's latest threats to crank his tariffs higher. The president threatening China with more tariffs after it raised its taxes on U.S. imports. It's a retaliatory tariff against the U.S. Now, the president is talking about an extra 34% tariff against China. That's set to kick in on Thursday. Now, if Beijing doesn't reverse course by Tuesday, President Trump plans to hit back with an additional 50% tariff. Experts say more tariffs could add to the uncertainty of the stock market, leading to more roller coaster days for investors and consumers.
Economists are saying the possibility of a recession continues to rise. And who suffers? The individual, the hard-working American.
I'm sick and tired of these foreign leaders saying, oh, how dare Donald Trump start a trade war when these countries have tariffs that are multiple times higher than ours are.
Now, President Trump's 10% baseline tax is now in effect on all foreign goods, and higher tariffs for countries with the worst trade deficits with the U.S., those start on Wednesday. And while that deadline is approaching, the White House says 50 countries have already reached out to negotiate on tariffs, including Japan, Canada, and Mexico. And the president will argue that's why these tariffs are in effect, in part because of being a negotiation tool. But when it comes to the tariffs, the Wall Street Journal has a rather gloomy forecast for Michigan's economy. It says our state will be the first victim of President Trump's trade war. While paraphrasing a University of Michigan economist, the Journal says the steel and aluminum tariffs alone will cost the state roughly 600 manufacturing jobs this year, plus an additional 1,700 jobs related to the auto industry. The Wall Street Journal also predicting the tariffs will increase the price of cars and trucks by around $8,000 apiece on average. Now, tariffs, one of the many topics on the table during a meeting between the president and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The two met in Washington at the Oval Office, where Netanyahu said Israel is backing the Trump administration on their tariff position, also vowing to eliminate the trade deficit with the United States. Another big issue the two talked about, the war with Hamas, which started 18 months ago, a year and a half ago. And that happened today, 18 months ago. President Trump says he's hopeful the conflict could end soon.
Well, I'd like to see the war stop, and I think the war will stop at some point that won't be in the too distant future. Right now we have a problem with hostages. We're trying to get the hostages out. We got quite a few of them out, but it's a long process. It shouldn't be that long.
Now, today marked Netanyahu's second visit to the White House since President Trump took his term in office for the second time. And as that meeting was happening, a protest was happening outside of Netanyahu's home in Jerusalem, where, as you see here, people were reading the names of hostages who are still being held by Hamas in Gaza. They say a deal needs to be made to bring those people home, and soon. Take a listen.
We are here near the house of the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. We call upon you, Netanyahu, Trump, please, it's been a year and a half. Bring them all home now. Netanyahu, you are free to go as you please. You can travel to the United States. Our brothers are not free. Let my people go. Bring them all home.
And Israeli forces move deeper into the Gaza Strip. We should tell you they're actually occupying more territory now. The IDF now controlling more than 50% of Gaza, with civilians being squeezed into small areas as the fight against Hamas gets more tense. Officials say they're creating a military buffer zone to keep Israeli civilians safe. A lot of talk about the Middle East in D.C. today. President Trump says the U.S. will hold direct talks with Iran about its nuclear program, warning Tehran could be in great danger if the talks aren't successful. The president insists Iran can't get nuclear weapons. The talks will happen on Saturday. And as the Trump administration continues to carry out deportations around the country, they've started revoking visas of many international students studying here in the United States. That includes some right here in Michigan. In fact, 4 University of Michigan students have had their visas revoked by Homeland Security. Several current and former international students' visas at Central Michigan University have also been terminated. Now, CMU officials say neither the university or the impacted students got any notification of their status being changed. Now, here's the deal. Secretary of State Marco Rubio warned they were going after student activists, but officials with the Michigan Immigrant Rights Center say all international students could be at risk.
Disheartening, and it's going to have profound effects both in university and college communities, but also at the bottom lines of many universities and colleges.
We have a right, like every country in the world has a right, to remove you from our country. We gave you a visa to come and study and get a degree, not to become a social activist that tears up our university campuses.
Now, students at Harvard, Stanford, and Ohio State University have also been impacted, just to name a few. Now, as of last week, more than 300 student visas have been revoked. Fox News Digital reached out to the Department of Homeland Security for comment. Now they're still waiting to hear back. So a lot to unpack and learn about these visa situations and why, if they weren't protests, these visas were revoked for those students. And we should mention many of these students have the right to reapply for a visa and then wait to see if the State Department grants that wish, many not willing to take that risk. We want to know what you thought about the situation. And to say you're fired up is an understatement. Many of you talking to me on social media. Andrew, thank you for writing to us on The Pulse. You say, it's shameful. I don't know any other way to put it. People that are here legally are getting sent away even though they did nothing wrong. These people are not criminals. They are students. They are young people in their early 20s trying to educate themselves, and we're kicking them out. He goes on to say, it's disgraceful. Julie, thank you for writing in on The Pulse. Julie Finn, you say this is absolutely wrong, even if the students took part in protests, as long as they didn't cause damage to property or assaulted anyone, they should be allowed to continue their studies. And finally, Doug, we thank you for writing in on The Pulse. I always think of it this way. If I'm a visitor in another country, the last thing I'm going to do is cause trouble. But again, we are waiting for more details regarding the deportations and the reasons why some of these students were being told that they needed to leave and go home. But to tell us what you think, if you have an opinion about this, all you have to do is chime in on our social media page, or you can send us an email at thepulse@fox.com. Well, the race for Michigan governor just got more crowded. Republican John James announcing today he's vying for that position, becoming the highest profile GOP candidate in the race and leaving open one of the nation's most competitive congressional seats that he currently holds. In a post to social media today, James says it's time to get Michigan's government back to what he called common sense, and says current leadership in our state has hurt our economy. He goes on to say he's worked with Donald Trump, the president, for years, and that wouldn't change now if he was elected to the seat being vacated by Governor Whitmer because of term limits. James's run for governor opens up Michigan's 10th congressional district, which covers parts of Oakland and Macomb counties. Now, other Republicans running for governor are Senate leader Eric Nesbitt and Anthony Hudson. They ran for Congress last year. Mayor Mike Duggan is leaving his current position with the city of Detroit to run as an independent. Then on the Democratic side of the ticket, Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist is looking to move up a rank. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson and Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson also running for the position. Michigan's newest governor will be elected next year, and we should mention that I reached out to John James, and he will be here on The Pulse next Monday night, a week from tonight. Well, still ahead, nothing stops Detroit, but will tariffs put the brakes on our economy here at home? Two people with a lot at stake and a lot of emotions about it. Take the debate on. You're watching The Pulse on a Monday night on Fox 2. Welcome back to The Pulse, where we focus on all things people, power, and politics. And when it comes to the president's tariffs, all three of those elements are involved. So many of you are talking about it on social media and elsewhere. Joining us to talk about this more, former Democratic State Rep Leslie Love and car concierge businessman Brian Carroll. Good to see you both. Thanks for joining us here.
Thank you.
Brian is the guy, basically, if you have, this is the time when everyone's talking about cars, you say, hey, I want to get out of my lease, I want to sell my car, I want to do something, but I'm kind of stuck in a situation where I can't. Brian figures out a way to broker a deal and make it happen. So let's begin with you, Brian. What are you noticing since The tariffs were announced, of course, 25% on the auto industry right away. What happened to your phone?
Well, it started blowing up. Everybody was kind of nervous about it, and just kind of told them just got to relax a little bit. Let's just try figuring it out. Once we figure it out, we'll get it all put together.
The car prices are going to go up. We mentioned today that the average car will go up $8,000 because of these tariffs. Does that concern you at all?
Well, I think with that too, what I've been told is they're going to kind of spread that money out in between the different lines of vehicles, so it won't be, I don't think, the true $8,000, but yeah, they're probably going to go up, but hopefully they can get these tariffs all worked out and we can get back to some normalcy here.
So here's the bottom line, and former State Rep Leslie Love, who keeps her hands on the pulse of things, I think the concern I'm hearing from many people, again, right there, employers pull back on hiring, eventually laying off workers, and then the economy doesn't do as well as it's doing. That seems to be the concern from many Democratic opponents of President Trump. Do you share that concern?
The concern is what will happen to our economy overall. This is huge. This is a kind of maybe a once in a generation moment that we're in. And the repercussions, this is a very hardcore game of poker that the president is playing, and we have to, he tells us to be patient, but we have very little patience. We didn't want to wait 6 months to deal with a global pandemic that was of none of our causing, and this is something that the president is putting upon American citizens without laying out the plan and the thought beforehand. We're just reacting and responding to it.
But let me ask you this, the way this has gone before, I believe it's something close to $1.6 trillion in 2024 that we were in a trade deficit with all these other countries, 180 countries. And so it was unfair. And so you heard Steve Morrow with the president's office today say, why is everyone complaining about this president putting tariffs? What about the rest of the world putting tariffs on us? Your thoughts on that?
Okay. So I came to this trying to understand why, what's the method, what's the reason, and this trade deficit. And so I'm not coming as a Democrat or a disgruntled American, even though I'm both.
Full disclosure. Okay.
Full disclosure, right? But the question of the trade deficit is, listen, there are some countries that have very little to buy from us. They don't have the economy. America, we're the big consumption government, so we're buying and buying and borrowing all the time. And so sometimes they don't have anything that they need to buy from America, but they have resources that we need. And so that trade is greater, that tariff is greater that they charge to Americans, because that's the way that nation generates revenue. So it's a little bit different.
But when you have countries like China, which is a huge trading partner, and we know how uneven the trade balance is there. You have countries like Japan. You have powerhouse countries that for years and generations have been ripping America off, as this president says. Do you believe that this is the response, or are you simply saying that you recognize a problem, but you don't think this is the response? Which one is it?
So it's complicated. So the big nations, China, Japan, the UK, India, are large traders with America.
Sure.
So of course you negotiate those things. And for Canada, Mexico, and America, we had an agreement that the president did negotiate when he was the president the last time. Right. Yep. And so that was supposed to be great. And then just a blanket across the board with everyone. Tariffs, the same, and then it was a different formula that was used. It's just the method is not equal, and it just seems very random.
And Brian, you're not shy about sharing that you think that eventually these tariffs are a good idea and good reason to do it. You see eye to eye with the president in terms of it. But I do have to ask you, today he posted on his Truth Social account essentially saying that we have to suck it up. He said we can't be weak. We have to be strong. We have to do this for the right cause, the right reason, for the long-term gratification. But the president is saying that having perhaps never walked an unemployment line, perhaps never having gone to a food bank.
Understand.
Elon Musk and him are pretty protected from that life. Do you worry that maybe this administration doesn't understand what some people are going through on the other side of the camera?
I don't believe so. Because I think that, this is all about, we got to kind of deflate the government a little bit. I think that it's very bloated right now, and we got to bring everything back into reality. And I think that if we do that, it's all about creating more jobs and stuff for us here. So if we're putting the tariffs on their the stuff coming in here, we're going to create more jobs, and they want to build more factories here instead of sending their stuff out to Mexico into Canada.
How long, because it takes on average, one auto industry analyst that I spoke with here on the Pulse a few days back, Jan Griffith, said it takes an average for 4 years for them to kind of build a plant and to make that happen. Do you think that that's, in the meantime, do you think too many people are being hurt?
Well, yes and no. Yes and no, because like they have the Romeo plant that it just was vacated 4 years ago. They can get that up and running in no time. Okay, so
we have buildings.
We have buildings that we saw, but it won't take long to get that going. Yes, it's going to hurt. It will, but in the long run, for our children and what we have going now, we got to build it back for them.
Right. So the goal of the tariffs, what I believe the president's goal was kind of threefold. One, he wanted to bring jobs back to America. He wanted to, the biggest thing is to reduce the trade deficit. And build manufacturing here. So that doesn't happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. And the last time I checked, this president is in his second term. So that's only 4 years. No one's building manufacturing plants like this. We don't know. It's too volatile right now. It's just like if you want to buy a pair of jeans, do we have the capacity in America to source cotton and then the milling of the cotton to make denim for jeans and at a price that's affordable? Considering that we just debated whether or not we wanted to raise minimum wage, if we wanted to raise tip wages. America is a very expensive place to manufacture and produce. That's why we have these trading partnerships with Mexico and India.
But Leslie,
and
let me
China.
ask you a question. He says we can make $600 billion a year. $6 trillion over 10 years we can bring back to the U.S. with these tariffs and help pay off the national debt that, as you mentioned, next generations, our grandchildren are going to have to pay a national debt that's going to be astronomical. Social Security is threatened because we don't have money to continue to fund the government. Do you think that maybe there's a way to do this, perhaps not the Trump way, but another way?
Yes. So
what are you suggesting?
I respect and appreciate the concept of this. The execution of it is problematic.
Brian, what do you think about the execution of this if he's promising to bring $600 billion a year back to the U.S.?
Well, personally, I mean, a lot of stuff that he has said has come true, but, you know, obviously there are some things that haven't also. But, again, we're so bloated that it needs to be deflated. It has to come back to some normalcy so we can get back at what we have going on out here. So I think that the execution may not be proper, might not, but I think.
But it's also a consumer mentality. As Americans, we have to change our culture. We're consumers. We dispose of things. Here, you don't like this, throw it away. You don't like that building, knock it down and build another one.
Yeah, right.
And that's so. Unless we change how we operate, do we value buying American? Do we value ESG, environmental, social, and governance programs, sustainability? Do we value diversity, equity, and inclusion programs? That's a cultural decision that Americans have to make in investing in our own people, our own resources, and it starts with us buying into that and then having policies that support that. And so you can't at the same time say we're going to get rid of DEI, that's not important. We're going to deport students because they want to voice an opinion, because they have relationships back in these countries, and all of this. And then at the same time say, but you know what? I'm going to give you this unfair trade agreement. It's not
look,
balanced.
There's so many layers to this administration. There are social issues. There are things that affect our bottom lines, and there's things that affect kind of autonomy and independence and all kinds of things. But when it comes to the tariffs, this is an interesting one that we're going to keep watching, and I want you two to come back on the show because you do have your hands on the pulse, and I'm very curious to know how this affects all of us. And I'm hopeful, of course, that all of us walk away as unscathed as this president promises we will. That's the hope.
Yeah.
We hope.
But we thank you both. Brian, Carol, Leslie, Love, good to see you both. Thanks for joining us on the Pulse. Good work. First time on the Pulse, Brian. Leslie, you did well as usual, and Brian, you did great too. Still ahead, from a nationwide protest efforts and conversations regarding DEI. You heard Leslie mention that so much happened while you were chilling out this weekend. We'll get you caught up. You're watching the Pulse here on Fox 2. Welcome back to the Pulse, Metro Detroit's only nightly political talk show on this Monday night. You know, the news doesn't stop over the weekend, so let's catch up on some things that you may have missed. Demonstrators across the nation and in several cities around Metro Detroit picking up and hitting the streets, all to protest President Trump and his different policies and executive orders, some of which we talked about with our guests. While people may have different reasons for coming out over the weekend, their main message was hands off. Take a listen.
It's hard to just pick one and go with it. That's why we said hands off, because hands off our Medicare, hands off our bodies, hands off our immigration system, hands off it all.
Hate never made any nation great, and right now there's too many people in our country being attacked.
We better protest now before it becomes too hard later.
There were close to 1,200 hands-off demonstrations planned across America. A plan to allow Medicare coverage for weight loss drugs has been rejected. On Friday, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services turned down a plan from the Biden administration to expand Medicare's coverage on medications like Zepbound and Wegovy, which are traditionally used to treat diabetes. The plan called to overturn a law that prohibits the service from covering the medications for patients 65 years or older who are obese but don't have diabetes. The weight loss medications often cost more than $1,000, making it just unaffordable for so many Americans on their own. U.S. Health Secretary RFK Jr. has been skeptical of weight loss drugs and has said he wants Americans to focus on their diets rather than relying on medication. Well, despite the threat of having federal funding pulled from public schools, New York State's Department of Education has rejected President Trump's order to scrap diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in public schools. All of the states were given 10 days to sign a letter agreeing to comply with the order from the Education Department, which basically said federal financial assistance is a privilege, not a right. However, in a letter sent Friday, officials with New York State Education Department said they don't believe the federal agency has authority to make those demands. Schools in New York get more than $2 billion every year in federal funds. That's about 5% of their budgets. An attorney for New York's Education Department says there are no federal or state laws prohibiting the principles of DEI. You know, talk of DEI has gained a lot of traction in the past few years, but people think it's recent. But it actually was following the high-profile death of George Floyd in Minnesota back in 2020. But really, the origins of DEI date back to the civil rights movement. Supporters say it's about giving everybody a seat at the table, but critics say DEI programs hurts other groups, namely white Americans. Those also argue that it may focus on hiring or accepting people based on characteristics besides their merit for the job, college admission, and so on. Now, we've covered this topic extensively on The Pulse. You can watch our past episodes on our library on fox2detroit.com. Just look for the Pulse tab right there. Well, the painter whose portrait of President Trump was dubbed, quote, truly the worst by the president himself, is feeling the pain of all of the bad press. Many Trump supporters have said she distorted the image on purpose. She says all the bad feedback has negatively impacted her business. Her portrait of Trump had been hanging up beside the portraits of other presidents at the state capitol in Denver, for nearly 6 years before President Trump criticized it last month. It was later removed at the request of Republicans who had originally commissioned the painting after raising $10,000 through a GoFundMe campaign. Well, that is the Pulse for tonight. Remember, if there's a question you'd like answered or you need something fact-checked, just send us an email at thepulse@fox.com. I'm Roop Raj. As always, I'll see you tomorrow night. Have a great night.
Yo.